Since the late 19th century, Southern state legislators had passed and maintained a series of Jim Crow laws that had disenfranchised the millions of African Americans across the South and enforced racial segregation. The initial voter registration drive started in 1963 by African American Dallas County Voters League and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee failed as local white officials arrested the organizers and otherwise harassed blacks wishing to register to vote. The passage of the Civil Rights Bill in 1964 legally ended segregation, but the situation in Selma changed little. The Dallas County Voters League then invited Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and the activists of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to amplify the efforts, and these figures drew more prominent people to Alabama. At the turn of the 20th century, the Alabama state legislature passed a new constitution that effectively disenfranchised most blacks and many poor whites by requirements for payment of a poll tax and passing a literacy test and comprehension of the Constitution. Subjective application of the laws effectively closed most blacks out of politics. Selma is a major town and the seat of Dallas County, part of the Alabama Black Belt with a majority black population. In 1961, the population of Dallas County was 57% black, but of the 15,000 blacks old enough to vote, only 130 were registered, fewer than 1%. With the literacy test administered subjectively by white registrators, even educated blacks were prevented from registering or voting. The Dallas County Voters League tried to register black citizens during the late 1950s and early 1960s. Their efforts were blocked by state and local officials, the White Citizens Council, and the Ku Klux Klan. By the 1960s, county officials and the Citizens Council used such tactics as restricted registration hours, economic pressure, including threatening people's jobs, firing them, evicting them from their leased homes, and economic boycotts of black-owned businesses, and violence against blacks who registered or who tried to register. When 32 black student teachers applied at the county courthouse to register as voters, they were immediately fired by the all-white school board. After the Birmingham church bombing in September 15, 1963, which killed 4 black girls, black students in Selma began sit-ins at local lunch counters to protest segregation. They were physically attacked and arrested. More than 300 were arrested in 2 weeks of protests, including SNCC chairman John Lewis. On October 7, 1963, one of 2 days during the month when residents were allowed to go to the courthouse to apply to register to vote, SNCC's James Foreman and the Dallas County Voting League mobilized more than 300 blacks from Dallas County to line up at the voters registration office in what was called a Freedom Day. SNCC members who tried to bring water to the African Americans waiting in line were arrested, as were those who held signs saying register to vote. After waiting all day in the hot sun, only a handful of the hundreds in the line were allowed to fill out the voter application, and most of those applications were denied by white county officials. The United States Justice Department lawyers and FBI agents were present and observing the scene, but took no action against the local officials. On July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, prohibiting segregation of public facilities. Some Jim Crow laws and customs remained in effect in Selma and other places for some time. When activists resumed efforts to integrate Selma's eating and entertainment venues, blacks who tried to attend the Wembley Theater or the Selmont Drive-In Theater and eat at the 25-cent hamburger stand were both beaten and arrested. On July 6, 1964, one of the 2 registration days that month, John Lewis led 50 black citizens to the courthouse. But County Sheriff Jim Clark arrested them all instead of allowing them to apply to vote. On July 9, 1964, Judge James Hare issued an injunction forbidding any gathering of 2 or more people under the sponsorship of civil rights organizations or leaders. This injunction made it illegal for more than 2 people at a time to talk about civil rights or voter registration in Selma, suppressing the public civil rights activity there for the next 6 months. With the civil rights activity blocked by Judge Hare's injunction, Frederick Douglass Reese requested the assistance of Martin Luther King and his organization. When SCLC officially accepted the invitation from the Courageous 8, Bevel, Nash, Orange, and others in the SCLC began working in Selma in December 1964. They also worked in the surrounding counties, along with the other SNCC staff who had been active there since early 1963. Since the rejection of the voting rights status for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party delegates by the regular delegates at the 1964 Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City, major tensions between Martin Luther King's organization and SNCC had been brewing. SCLC ultimately remained neutral in the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party dispute to maintain its ties with the National Democratic Coalition. Many SNCC members believed that they were in an adversarial position with an American establishment which they thought had scorned grassroots democracy. SNCC's focus was on bottom-up organizing, establishing deep-rooted local power bases through community organizing. They had become distrustful of SCLC's spectacular mobilizations, which were designed to appeal to the national media in Washington, D.C., but which most of the SNCC organization believed did not result in major improvements for the lives of African Americans on the ground. But SNCC Chairman John Lewis, also an SCLC board member, believed mass mobilizations to be invaluable, and he urged the group to participate. SNCC called in Faye Bellamy and Silas Norman to be full-time organizers in Selma. The hard line of segregation was represented by Dallas County Sheriff Jim Clark, who used violence and repression to maintain Jim Crow. He commanded a posse of 200 deputies, some of whom were members of the Ku Klux Klan chapters or the National States' Rights Party. Possemen were armed with electric cattle prods. Some were mounted on horseback and carried long leather whips they used to lash people on foot. The Selma Voting Rights Campaign officially started on January 2nd, 1965, when Martin Luther King addressed a mass meeting in Brown Chapel AME Church in defiance of the anti-meeting injunction. The date had been chosen because Chief Clark was out of town, and Chief Baker had stated he would not enforce the injunction. Over the following weeks, SCLC and SNCC activists expanded voter registration drives and protests in Selma and the adjacent Black Belt counties. After King returned to Selma, the first big Freedom Day of the new campaign occurred on January 18th. According to their respective strategies, Chief Baker's police were cordial towards the demonstrators, but Chief Clark refused to let black registrants enter the county courthouse. Clark made no arrests or assaults at this time. However, in an incident that drew national attention, Dr. King was knocked down and kicked by a leader of the National Rights Party, who was quickly arrested by Chief Baker. Chief Baker also arrested the head of the American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell, who said he'd come to Selma to run King out of town. On January 20th, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave his inaugural address, but did not mention voting rights that was impacting and affecting the black community. On January 25th, United States District Judge Daniel Thomas issued rules requiring that at least 100 people must be permitted to wait at the courthouse without being arrested. After Dr. King led marchers in the courthouse that morning, Jim Clark began to arrest all registrants in excess of 100 and corralled the rest. Annie Lee Cooper, a 53-year-old practical nurse who had been part of the Selma movement since 1963, struck Clark after he twisted her arm, and she knocked him to his knees. 4 deputies seized Cooper, and photographers captured images of Clark beating her repeatedly with this club. The crowd was inflamed, and some wanted to intervene against Clark, but King ordered them back as Cooper was taken away. Although Cooper had violated nonviolent discipline, the movement rallied around her. Dr. King decided to make a conscious effort to get arrested for the benefit of publicity. On February 1st, King and Ralph Abernathy refused to cooperate with Chief Baker's traffic directions on the way to the courthouse, calculating that Baker would arrest them, putting them in the Selma City Jail run by Baker's police, rather than the county jail run by Clark's deputies. Once processed, King and Abernathy refused to post bond. On the same day, SCLC and SNCC organizers took the campaign outside of Dallas County for the first time in nearby Perry County, where 700 students and adults were arrested. On the same day, students from Tuskegee Institute, working in cooperation with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, were arrested for acts of civil disobedience in solidarity with the Selma campaign. In New York and Chicago, Friends of SNCC chapters staged sit-ins in federal buildings in support of the Selma blacks. And core chapters in the North and West also mounted protests. Solidarity pickets began circling in front of the White House later that night. After the assault on Dr. King by the white supremacists in January, black nationalist leader Malcolm X had sent an open telegram to George Lincoln Rockwell stating, "If your present racist agitation against our people here in Alabama cause physical harm, you and your KKK friends will be met with maximum physical retaliation from those of us who believe in asserting our right to self-defense by any means necessary.
And perhaps you may find him there.